I had no idea this is Lebanese in origin.
But the al pastor tradition came from that?
I know nothing about certain food cultures, and unfortunately, all of Mexico is one of them. Right?
That very much goes to sort of the stereotypes that Americans have always had about Mexico, that Mexicans can only be of Indian descent and Spanish descent, and that you don't have all these different traditions coming in and making Mexican food what it is.
That is award-winning chef David Chang and his friend Gustavo Arellano on the new Netflix show Ugly Delicious. So this 8-episode series explores how food can be used to break down cultural barriers. For instance, pizza in Japan or tacos in Copenhagen.
Right. You haven't seen a food show like this before,
No.
I don't think. Chang and other chefs, food critics, and celebrities travel the world to discuss the historical and societal influence on different cuisines. The episodes are broken up by types of food, from crawfish to fried rice to barbecue, and explore some of the little-known facts about the things that we eat all the time.
Academy Award-winning director Morgan Neville is behind the docu-series, and he is here to talk about his experience. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are amongst fans.
Yes, you will.
Like in front of the camera and behind the camera, everyone loves the series.
We love your work. We really love your work. So let's talk about this series, because one of the things that's kind of interesting about it is it isn't really food porn. You were right, Anne-Marie. It's something that most people haven't seen, because, you know, when you look at, for example, Anthony Bourdain's show, it's got a certain type of vibe, which is centered generally around him and his experiences. This is very different. Talk about the vision for this.
Sure. Well, we have ugly in the title, so it's definitely not food porn. It's not, it's not that thing. And we very intentionally wanted to do that. So the thing about Dave, when I got to know him a couple of years ago, we met, and he and his friends, Peter Meehan, our other executive producer who had Lucky Peach magazine, they would get together and they would argue about food. And I love that. And the thing is, like food programs, if you watch them, for the most part, it's somebody telling you the way it's done and they're narrating it, and everybody agrees that this is the best thing or this is the technique. And I kept thinking, oh, where are the people arguing about this? So in a way, the show is like a debate show masquerading as a food show.
It reminded me of, so I live in Philadelphia, right? So it reminded me of when you sort of have a late night and everybody tumbles out of whatever bar or club you're in, and everyone wants to go for a cheesesteak, and first you argue about where the best place is, and then as you're eating the cheesesteak, you're having this intense argument about whether you should have whiz or not, and it felt like I was eavesdropping on someone else's journey like that. I think everyone's had that kind of late night journey, right? And it's funny. The conversations are funny, but you also inject humor in these sort of quirky little ways. It's a sitcom sort of beginning to one of them, or like an infomercial.
You did a clip on the Julia Childs, or Dan Aykroyd as Julia Childs from SNL. There's a clip of that where blood, I'm not giving it away, but it's really funny. There's little moments like that that really elevate it beyond just what you see on like the Food Channel.
For sure. We wanted to make something irreverent, you know, and Dave's that way, and kind of the group of chefs he hangs out with and food writers. And we said, well, let's just capture that energy. Let's make something that's just totally free.
This is actually the scene I'm talking about.
Oh my God. But even scenes, there's an episode we did about shrimp and crawfish, and the whole opening of that episode is about a meal we had in New Orleans when we were shooting, and we met a waiter, and I ended up filming the scene on my phone.
Are you serious?
And it's the opening of the episode, so we wanted to be loose about it that way.
It is that indeed.
Nailed it.
The other thing that is really fascinating about this is the talk of race as it relates to food, in addition to culture. And you do that not only by exploring African American cuisine, specifically with fried chicken, and sort of the racist imagery that exists around that, but also Chinese food, where the discussion that, you know, I've always, and my girlfriend is Chinese American, we've always had this discussion about the fact that people in America see Chinese food as something that's cheap, and you know, but Japanese food is it's okay to spend $200 on sushi. No one would ever spend $200 on Chinese food. At least that's the perception. How did that discussion come about, and why did you choose to incorporate it?
I mean, I think this is one of the things that Dave's most obsessed about, is this kind of issue, because as a chef, he's fought against a lot of these things. He was embarrassed by his own kind of Asian cuisine upbringing. He loved that food, he grew up with it, but he felt like he had to study French technique and European cuisine to be considered a serious chef. And I think his whole story as a chef is, let me bring the food that I actually eat and we cook for each other, we cook at home, and elevate that, because that's really the food we all want to be eating, because it's incredibly delicious. It's not just about the presentation on the perfect plate, it's just about taste, you know, and let's forget everything else. Just if it tastes great,
It's fascinating the way you've done this, because it's this argument that folds in on each other. What's good food? What's quality food? What's as we would say, bougie food, right? And why are we even having that conversation? Why can't you get pizza from Domino's? If it's delicious to you, then why can't that be high-class pizza? Or American Chinese cuisine. Why is that considered not real Chinese? It's Chinese. It's American Chinese.
Even Italian food that is sourced using only American products. Is it still Italian food?
Yeah, and they're fascinating questions to have. But the idea is that, all food tells a story. It's not just Michelin star food that tells a story, or the, cool little food cart that Anthony Bourdain may visit. It's fast food tells a story. All food says something about who we are. And that's the thing, is food is the most omnipresent part of culture. We all have a relationship with food, and we all identify some way with what we eat and the food we grew up eating.
I think one of there were two touching scenes that affected us when we were watching it as first-generation American, the children of immigrants, is when they were talking to an older Asian gentleman, and he was talking about how his cuisine, specifically from Vietnam, is a bridge to people, and how they don't mind working in restaurants. Perhaps 30 or 40 years ago, the children of the first Chinese immigrants who opened restaurants in San Francisco would go on to be businessmen or doctors or lawyers, and now that you're seeing that their children also kind of agree with that sentiment. And when David is in Japan and he is getting a little bit of that yakitori, and he tells the chef that he's a master, and you could tell these are Japanese chefs. They're not prone to sentimentality, but you could see he's very moved that he just goes over to the fire, and that was a great scene.
He got teared up, and we all did. You don't expect a discussion about yakitori to become an emotional scene, but it is, because again, his whole identity as a yakitori chef for his entire life is about making the best possible thing he can, and when it's recognized by somebody who can appreciate it, it touches him.
For sure.
How did you pick the foods, and which foods were left on the cutting room floor that you weren't able to get to?
There were so many foods. I mean, we could do hopefully many seasons of this show, because there are so many different stories we couldn't get to. It's it's our plan.
That's the hope, right?
It's the hope, and people seem to be loving the show.
So
and
what didn't you get to? So give me a couple that you wish you could have done.
Oh, there's so many things. I mean, everything from
Haitian food.
Well, Haitian food's a gun. Indian food. We talked a lot about doing an episode.
We talked about. We had that debate about Indian food and why are some ethnic foods elevated to high class, expensive foods, and Indian food is sort of in this middle
they're
zone.
Trying. They're
trying to do both. Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about Middle Eastern food too. You know, the idea of Turkey, like a country where literally Asia and Europe touch each other in the middle of Istanbul, and for 1,000 years, food has traveled on the Silk Road.
That's such a great point. I would love to see something around that, like Turkish food versus Lebanese food versus Israeli food. I mean, when I go there, I'm like, it's the same. And they're like, no, it's not.
Yes.
It's so true.
So we've been talking about those kinds of ideas. I'd love to do South America. There are a couple of stories in Argentina and different things like that.
I have a feeling that if that's the plan, which is to continue this, Netflix would be crazy not to do this. It's a brilliant documentary. I'm a huge fan of yours. We were talking about this. We love 20 Feet from Stardom, one of our favorite movies. You won an Academy Award for that. You did a documentary. I mean, you've done tons, but Scotty Moore, the man who invented rock and roll, who opened Sun Records and recorded all these great artists.
Sam Phillips with Scotty.
Sorry, what did I say?
Scotty Moore.
Yes.
Elvis's guitarist.
Yes,
but
guitarist.
they're all in it.
They're all in that doc. That was a great doc. One last thing on 20 Feet from Stardom. So what is Claudia Lanier doing now? Is she still teaching?
She's still teaching, but now she's gigging, too.
Is she?
She is, and she lives not that far from me, so I see her occasionally, and she'll come into town and play. And
did the movie help to sort of revitalize her career?
The movie helped everybody's life.
Right.
I mean, all the singers, people like Lisa Fisher and Darlene Love, they're doing amazing work right now. So that's something I never expected, but it's pretty amazing.
It's so wonderful that you did that film. And I interviewed Darlene Love, and she was she acknowledged the fact that this, reignited interest in who she is and her career. The work that you do is incredible. We're really, really happy to have you here, Morgan.
For the next season, I'm just going to put in a possibility.
Yes.
Come down to Philly. I'll guide you through this.
Nice.
I'm not going to say cheesesteaks. I'm going to say the Hoagie Hero Sub Debate.
good.
That's a biggie.
Call them grinders in Rhode Island.
My husband and I, we mix it up all the time. I say it's a sub because I'm from Toronto. It's a sub.
Right.
He says no, it's a completely different thing. It's called a hoagie.
Yeah, I know. Po' boy, New Orleans.
Po' boy, right? Po' boy. New Orleans is a big part of this series too. You talk, you go to New Orleans, and people should watch this.
They should.
This is really great.
Yeah,
Just eat something first.
Exactly. Do it on a full belly, or you'll be ordering all sorts of things.